We are very, very happy to have with us today Laura Riffel from the behaviordoctor.org website, and she also has strong ties to the National PBIS organization. She manages their website. So I encourage you to visit her pbis.org website and her behaviordoctor.org website. And Laura also does have a connection to deafness. She has worked with the Kansas School for the Deaf. So I'll let her tell a little bit more about that. And please join me in welcoming Laura.
Thanks. Before we get started and I tell you anything about myself, let me tell you a little bit about how I do trainings. If you have snuck in knitting, crocheting, crossword puzzles, anything like that, please feel free to quit hiding it under the table. I totally understand that some people need to do something, to fiddle with something in order to organize your thoughts, to pay attention. Research actually says that it will increase your retention by at least 3%. So feel free to fiddle with anything that you want to fiddle with, hair, things like that. If you need to rock that invisible baby that we all carry with us and you want to go stand in the back and rock that baby, please feel free to do that. If you have to go to the restroom and I have not given you a break and you're dying, please just get up and go. I will not be offended. I totally know that you won't hear a word I'm saying if you are about to die. So just get up and go and come back, please. I will tell you I'm ADHD. So if you have your phone on and it rings, I will not be able to help myself. I mean, I don't do it on purpose, but sounds. It's like, oh, a shiny object, and I will look. So I'll just tell you, put your phone on vibrate, and then I won't look at you. But I know that some of you have to have your phones on because of behaviors that might happen. All right, and will you be my break person? Will you tell me that it's 10:45? Just because I get excited talking and I forget to give people breaks. If I don't need to go to the restroom, I forget other people might. So what's your name? Brenda. You guys, if Brenda doesn't stop me at 10:45, who will you be mad at? Brenda. So everybody knows who to be mad at. All right. I have taught every single grade, pre-K through adults. I taught kids who were incarcerated. I taught regular ed, I taught special ed. This just proves to you that I have ADHD. I never stayed with any one grade for more than 4 years. But I did teach in Olathe, Kansas, which is where the Kansas School for the Deaf is housed. And our school, our public school, Scarborough Elementary, was the school where all the parents who wanted to send their kids to public school and have their kids do signing exact English could come. Barbara Lukey Stallman's children were there, and Mary Pat was in kindergarten when I was teaching kindergarten. Yeah. And,
I'm just thinking Barbara Lukey Stallman was my teacher.
Oh my goodness.
At Northern.
Oh wow. Yeah. Awesome. Well, what was cool was we all had our own interpreters, and sign language was taught to our students. So by the time these kids went through kindergarten through 6th grade, they had 600 kids that could sign. And then when we went to the middle school, or it was the junior high back then, but the kids all from our elementary school knew how to sign, and then they taught signing exact English as a foreign language to anybody else who wanted to take it at the junior high. So the kids could sign up and take it so that they could have conversations with their friends. And they offered free sign lessons for all of us every week at night. Parents, I brought my own personal children. I mean, it was just free, and we could all come and take those lessons. And so it was really a unique experience and a lot of fun. And each of us had anywhere from 3 to 5, 3 to 6 kids in our class who were deaf or hard of hearing. And we learned quickly about the FM mics to be sure and turn them off and take them off before we went to the bathroom. And things that everybody has a story to tell about how they forgot that. All right. Well, before we get started, just I have some fun things I like to share. I like to give out presents, and it's not really part of this training to have a lot of presents because this one's typically a follow-up for the basic functional behavior assessment, which you guys don't need, but I want to give you the gifts that would have come with that. So let me tell you, there are 4 rules about behavior that they should have told us when we very first started working with children. The first rule about behavior is learned and it serves a specific purpose. Kids have learned, if I do this, adults typically do that. As a matter of fact, research says that a 9-week-old infant knows to fake a cough to get adult attention. If they know that at 9 weeks, imagine what they figured out by the time they get to school, and by the time they get to junior high, and by the time they get to high school. To kids, we are vending machines. They know how to push our buttons and get us to deliver goods. The second rule about behavior is related to the context within which it occurs. Now, this is the one that gets us into trouble with parent-teacher conferences. When we sit down at the table with parents and we start talking about behavior that's happening at school, what do a lot of parents say? Of course they don't. Yeah, well, sometimes they don't. Sometimes the parents are on that river, denial. I know, old joke. But think about this, folks. At school, it's a very different context than at home. So the parents very well may not see those behaviors at home. No one at home asks a kid to sit on a hardwood or plastic chair for 7.5 hours. They don't. They sit on a really nice, cushy sofa or divan or couch, whatever you call it in Chicago area. I know I sometimes call it something and people are like, what is that? So I've tried to use all 3 words. Also, at home, no one has fluorescent lights over their head except maybe in the kitchen. And we know that the flicking of the fluorescent lights causes some behaviors in kids. As a matter of fact, I was doing training in Reykjavik, Iceland, and I went to all the schools in Reykjavik. And none of the kids in Iceland sit on hardwood or plastic chairs while they're learning. They sit on bar stools. Not because they're training them to be good drinkers, although Iceland is known for their drinking, but they sit on bar stools at counter height tables. So the little bitty kids have little kid height counters, and the older kids have taller height counters. The bar stools are padded about this much. They have a barrel-shaped back, so the bar stools swivel side to side like this. They've got a kickstand where the kids can swing their feet, and what the kids are getting is proprioceptive input, which is exactly what kids with ADHD need. It's exactly what you're going to need after about an hour of sitting in that chair. Even though it's padded a little bit, you're going to need to get up and move and give yourself some proprioceptive input, that side-to-side movement where your body is in time and space. The other thing that I thought was interesting in Iceland, the kids are all barefoot or in their stocking feet. The minute they enter the school, they take off their shoes and socks, or their shoes for sure, and they walk around barefoot. And I didn't think anything of it while I was there other than, oh my gosh, it's so cold. The last thing I want to do is take my shoes and socks off. Plus, when was the last time I had a pedicure? So I'm not sure I want to do that. But I recently read a research article that said that if kids are stressed, if they take off their shoes and wiggle their toes, they will reduce anxiety and it will increase test scores. So with the high stakes testing that's going on, I just want to throw this out to you guys. Right before the test, have all the kids take off their shoes for sure, maybe their socks if you want, and recommend that they wiggle their toes because research says it improves test scores. Wouldn't it be amazing? I mean, Iceland beats us in everything, in reading and math and all those things. Wouldn't it be amazing that something so tiny as taking your shoes and socks off, or at least your shoes off, and wiggling your toes, and maybe having a little bit more cushy of a seat to sit on, or getting some proprioceptive input could help raise our reading and writing scores? I mean, it could be that simple, folks. So I have your first present. I'm into frogs, and I want you to look at this frog, and I want you to think, behavior is learned and it serves a specific purpose, and behavior is related to the context within which it occurs. Now, why will this silly little frog remind you of that? Because of the story I'm about to tell. So I'm going to start passing the frogs around as I tell the frog story. Now, I always tell this story. This is the story of a fisherman. Now, my dad loved to fish, and as a kid, I could not understand why my father liked this fishing thing so much. When I became a parent, I understood why my father liked this fishing thing so much. So this story will kind of illustrate my father and his fishing expeditions. This is the story of a fisherman who was alone on the lake without his children. He was out there fishing, and all of a sudden he looked over the side of the boat, and swimming through the water was a snake. And in the snake's mouth was a frog, and the frog's eyes were this big. And the fisherman knew what was going to happen to that frog. So here's where you know this story turns to fiction. The fisherman leaned over the side of the boat. He gently released the frog, and the frog swam happily away. Oh, but then the fisherman looked at the snake, and he realized, I've taken away his meal. I must offer him something to eat. So he scrounged around the bottom of the boat, and that big old Subway sandwich that his wife had sent, not even a shred of lettuce on the bottom of the boat. And those warm chocolate chip cookies, not even a chocolate chip. And the sad, empty sack of potato chips was staring up at him. He had nothing to offer the snake except a bottle of whiskey. So he offered the snake some whiskey, and the snake greedily drank some and then swam rather crookedly away. And the fisherman went back to fishing. And just as he was enjoying the peace and solitude of the sun setting on the lake, all of a sudden on the side of the boat, he heard bam, bam, bam. And he looked over the side of the boat, and the snake was back with 3 friends, each with a frog. Now, folks, why would I tell a story like that? One, I don't want you to misrule on this. I'm not calling children snakes. It's just a story. I'm also not condoning giving whiskey to children. Save it for yourselves. There are days when you need it. But sometimes kids show up at our boat with one behavior, wanting one thing. And sometimes, folks, we provide a better frog than what they were going for in the first place. And that's why that behavior shows up again and again and again. So I want you to look at this frog, and I want you to think, what has the child learned is the payoff for this behavior, and under what context is it showing up? So there's the first 2 rules about behavior. Now each rule gets a little harder to hear because they're a little tougher on us, the adults who are doling out the behavior plans. The 3rd rule about behavior is a rule of thumb. It's not an always kind of case. But here's the rule. For every year that a behavior has been in place, we should consider 1 month of consistent, appropriate intervention for us to see a change. Now, that doesn't mean if your husband's 37 that it's going to take 37 months for the socks to make it in the hamper. It doesn't mean if your wife has a problem with credit cards, it's going to take 36 months for her to quit using the credit cards. But it does mean that forever how long the behavior's been in place. So just because you work with 18-year-olds or 15-year-olds, it doesn't mean it's going to take 15 months or 18 months, because that behavior hasn't been in place their whole life. Now, that's just a rule of thumb. And here, let me tell you why I read that research in 1980. And at first I didn't pay much heed to it, and then I got to thinking, you know, here's what happens to me as a behavior therapist all the time. I will go into a school, and I will look at a kid, and let's say it's a kid that really could use a visual schedule. So I will make the visual schedule, I'll laminate it, I'll put the Velcro on it, I'll stay all day and model how to use it. And then typically I can't get back for another month. I come back a month later, and I say, how's the visual schedule working? And the classroom teacher says, oh, it didn't work. How long did you try it? 2 days. I think it's going to take more than 2 days. So I've been telling people that since 1980, just when I read that research. And about 6 years ago, I thought to myself, you know, Laura, you're a hypocrite. You tell people that all the time, and yet you don't apply that to your own personal life. Because as an overweight woman, what do I do every January 1st? Make a resolution to start a diet. On February 1st, I am not a size 4, so what do I do with my diet? Toss it out the window and eat everything I didn't eat for the last month. So 6 years ago, I thought to myself, all right, Laura, how long have you been overweight? And here I am talking to myself, and at first I lied to myself. I said 12 years, and then I thought, oh, wait a minute. No, it's been a little longer than that. My oldest son's adopted, so I can only blame him for stress eating. I got him when he was 12. I got him for the wonder years. I wonder what I'm doing. So there was lots of cheese eating. That's my stress comfort food. But the one I gave birth to, she's going to be 31 years old. That means 6 years ago she was 24. That means 24 months of never, ever, ever cheating. No birthday cake, no Thanksgiving turkey, no Christmas whatever, no Easter, no. Oh, that ain't going to happen. But because I had a mindset change about how long it was going to take, I've been able to stick with a diet for 6 years. I have lost, I'm embarrassed to tell you, I have lost 80 pounds, over 80 pounds. I still beep when I back up, but I'm getting better. But I've been able to stick with it. I pick one day a month that I can eat whatever I want. So each month, so like this month it's going to be Valentine's Day because I want to eat a nice steak on Valentine's Day. But I've been able to stick with it for that long because I had a mindset change. And that's what I really want you to get. That's the real magic of changing behavior. And I know that as behavior specialists, you guys are expected to have a magic wand, right? Everybody thinks you've got one. Well, now I'm giving you one. In this bag, I have your very own magic wand. And I'm into choices, so there's lots of colors. I just want you to see. You have to open the packages. So you don't have to take a pink one. You can take a blue one or a silver one. But we will pass these around. And I started on this side last time, so I'm going to start on this side this time. Oh, you don't want one? I'll start with you. Now, do not take these magic wands home and give them to your children. I ordered them from Oriental Trading Company, and I do not know about the lead content. I mean, I'm being serious. I said that in Ohio, and I looked out, and all the teachers had them in their mouths. So if you hear about brain damage in Ohio, I may have caused it. But I want you to put this wand up high so that no kid can get it. And I want you to just see it every day to remind yourself the 1 month for every year rule. That when we put an intervention in place, we need to consider 1 month for every year that behavior's been in place. And be sure and share that with the classroom teachers and the paraprofessionals and the interpreters. Everybody who's working with kids, share it with parents. Because so often parents will hear a good intervention, but they'll try it for 2 days and then say it didn't work. And what they don't understand is that sometimes, for instance, when a child lays down in the middle of the floor at Walmart and has a tantrum, and the parent says, I'll buy you this Barbie if you stop screaming, that they just taught the kid tantrum equals Barbie. So the next time they go to Walmart, kid lays down in the middle of the floor and starts screaming. So then they've gone to some training and they're like, okay, don't pick off. Well, then the kid screams louder because it worked the first 15. All right. So the first couple of times that you don't buy a Barbie, you're going to get louder screaming. And so parents will say, see, it didn't work. Well, of course it didn't work because you taught the kid for the last 15 months that tantruming did pay off. So be sure and share this with parents. Very important that everybody understand we've got to come up together with a plan and we've got to stick with it long enough for it to work. So if one person pays off, if one person buys a Barbie, we just took 2 steps back for every step. It slides backwards. So look at that magic wand and think that. Now the last rule about behavior, it's a tough one to hear, and it comes with a story. Shores, Gunter, and Jack sat around in classrooms across America and measured how often kids did the right thing. What percentage of the time do you think they found that kids actually did the right thing? 80? You're exactly right. It is 80%. Now, typically, if I ask that in April or May, I get a much lower number. because April and May are tough months. October, I get lower numbers. I've just noticed certain months seem to be more difficult. December, but February, unless the weather gets really bad later this month and kids don't get outside to play, you're feeling pretty good. It is 80%. Kids do the right thing 80% of the time. But why some months doesn't it feel like that? What do you guys have to deal with? The 80% or the 20%? Yeah, we have to deal with the 20%. We're not walking down the hallway with a group of kids thinking how wonderful that everybody is in the third square over from the hall, keeping their hands and feet at their side with a bubble in their mouth and not bothering anybody around them. We're not thinking that. We're thinking, oh my gosh, I got to call this parent. That kid's got to go to the nurse. This kid needs that. That report's due to the office at 3 o'clock. And the only time we come out of that fog is when some kid jumps up and knocks the exit sign down and plastic goes flying all over the floor and we have to deal with that. That's what we think about. Now, that isn't the rule about behavior. They also measured how often, now these were not PBIS schools, so I'll just throw that in. How often did they hear adults say, good job, I like the way everybody's walking nicely down the hallway. I like the way you're looking at me. I like the way you raised your hand before you blurted out the answer. I like the way. How often did adults in the environment say things that complimented or labeled appropriate behavior? Yeah, not very often. 20? Yeah, that's what I thought. I actually had somebody measure me because I thought, oh, I'm good at that. I wasn't very good at that. Not as good as I thought I was. The average that Shores, Gunter, and Jack found was 1.44%. Less than 2%. I cheat and round up to 2% because actually the mathematicians would get mad at me because you should have rounded to 1%. Now, is it because we're a bunch of mean, nasty, horrible people walking around schools? It's because every year you're juggling 50 balls in August. By the time December gets here, you got 75 balls you're juggling. By the time May gets here, you got about 150 balls that you're juggling. All these things that are going on that have to be done and have to be completed. So the last thing we think to do is say, good job, I like the way you, and label a behavior. So your last present is something you have been dying to have. You have always wanted one of these. Your whole life, you have wanted one. And I'm going to give it to you. It's an ugly bracelet. Don't all rush up here. I know. It's an ugly bracelet. So in this bag, I have, now, don't hang me out. Have silly bands been outlawed in your area? Have they? If they have, I have other backup bracelets for those of you whose silly bands have been outlawed. So I have silly bands and I have other ugly bracelets, but they are ugly. Help yourself, and I know this one will take a while to go around because you'll pull them out and try to figure out what each shape is, and that's okay. I want you to put this on the wrist that you write with because that happens to be the hand that you tend to gesture with the most. It tends to be the hand that you drive with, and you'll see it. And let this be a reminder that we can improve behavior by 80% just by pointing out what one person is doing correctly. If you say to a group of kids, wow, I love the way you raised your hand and answered that question when I called on you, way to go. What happens in the room? All of a sudden, every other kid's hand goes up in the air. Watch what happens. Well, it won't happen now because I just said this. I love your posture. You have the best posture I have ever seen. Now, because I said that, yeah, but what typically happens if I don't warn you ahead of time? Everybody else sits up straight and tall because somebody got complimented for that behavior. Here, I'm hogging it. I'm going to start in the back this time because they always feel left out back here. So you get to start the ugly bracelets. Now, ladies, if you're lucky, your husband will replace that ugly bracelet with a pretty one. Mine did. He got tired of the ugly bracelet. Plus, he said it smelled after a while. So he got me a better one. All right, are you ready to have fun and get started now? We'll review the 4 rules about behavior at the end because I know I gave you a lot all at once. I call this training Mining for Gold with students who are deaf or hard of hearing in mind, specifically for you guys. So you guys have an insert that goes into this that's a little bit different than what I typically do. And I just thought about all the kids that I've had over the years and the behaviors that showed up, like a kid who closed their eyes when they didn't want to pay attention to me. So I added those in for you, and we'll talk about those. But I really like to start out with something really positive, and I want to show you something new that I have come up with. And it's something that's near and dear to my heart, and I know that once I make it known to you, it's going to be near and dear to your heart as well. And so this is for kids with low self-esteem. I looked up the statistics on self-esteem, and although self-esteem is hard to measure, Canfield measured that 80% of first graders have high self-esteem. If you talk to a first grader, a little bitty kid, they pretty much think they can do anything. There's a guy on TED.com. Have any of you ever gone to TED.com? It's a website of people giving 20-minute speeches, and they're like the best people in the whole wide world to give speeches on things. And Sir Ken Robinson is giving a speech about kids and creativity, and he tells the story about a 5-year-old who's drawing a picture, and typically this little girl's behavior has been way out of control. And all of a sudden, the teacher gives an assignment to draw a specific picture, and the little girl gets right to work right away and just starts drawing. And so the teacher's really interested in how come, this is the bright spot in the room, that all of a sudden this little girl did exactly what she was asked to do. So the teacher went over and asked her, "What are you drawing?" And she said, "I'm drawing a picture of God." And the teacher said, "But honey, nobody really knows exactly what God looks like." And the little girl goes, "They will in a minute." That's the kind of self-esteem that kids have. They think they've got the answer to everything when they're little. By the time they get to 5th grade, 1% of the kids have high self-esteem. By the time they get to high school, 5% of the kids have high self-esteem. So somewhere along the line, self-esteem gets killed. So I started thinking, what can we do about that? So I started doing research, and I came up with something that I have 102 schools that I work with in Kansas and Oklahoma, and I made an assignment to them. I asked them to go back to their staff. I meet with the coaches every month. I asked them to go back to their staff and share my new technique with their staff and get them to do one student in each classroom and do the 4 P's for raising self-esteem. Now, I had tried this out at an alternative school. And what we found at the alternative school, lots of kids have low self-esteem at the alternative school. What we found was it was so successful that kids' grades went up. And when their grades went up, they felt more confident about themselves, their behaviors went down. So it was a great win-win. So then I put it in place because I thought, okay, I know it works with kids at alternative school, at this one alternative school. So now I have 102 schools across Oklahoma and Kansas who have done the 4 P's for raising self-esteem. And if you will look in your books on page 81, you have, and I know I'm jumping right in, but I like to start with something positive, so I want to share this with you. These are the 4 P's for raising self-esteem: public relations, proficiency, power, and philanthropy. And I'll tell you what each one of those means. So on page 81 in your book, you've got a square. You actually have 2 squares in the middle instead of one big circle, but it says the same thing. So public relations, proficiency, power, and philanthropy. If we put all 4 of these in place as interventions for the students, we can see behavior go down and academics go up. And I'm going to show you some real results. So public relations. How many of you have given a compliment to a kid, and the minute you gave the kid a compliment, they acted up? How many of you have had that happen? That's a kid with low self-esteem. You cannot take a kid with low self-esteem and stand him up in front of the class and say, everybody clap for Johnny, everybody clap for Susie, because if you do that, you know what's going to happen. So how can we make this kid look good in front of their friends? What could we do to make them look good in front of their classmates without holding them up in front of the class? So I'll give you some ideas. We need to be their PR agent, is what I say. They need to look good in front of their friends, but we don't want to compliment them, because if we compliment them out loud in front of the class, now you can give them a private compliment, and it's probably going to go over okay. Or you can give them a little slip of paper turned upside down, slid to them that says, I really like the way you raised your hand. I really like the way you sat in your seat. I really like the way you helped Billy on the playground when he fell and scraped his knee. You can give them a little slip of paper that says that, but don't compliment them in front of the whole class. And here's why that doesn't work for kids with low self-esteem. Inside their head, they think they are lower than low. They are bad. They think they're bad kids. When you say something good about them, that does not match how they feel on the inside about themselves. So they have to have a behavior to make themselves look as bad as they feel, so that they get that feeling from you that they are right about their self-assertion and that they're a bad kid. And I'll have kids tell me that. They'll say, I'm a bad kid. Well, why do you think you're a bad kid? And they'll just say, because I'm always in trouble. And later on today, I'll share some other things that kids have told me why they think they're a bad kid. So one of the things that we can do to let kids look good in front of the class is to run the smart board in the classroom. If you have smart boards in your classroom, run the computer, run the PowerPoint. You know, they could run the clicker. They could go to the board and be your secretary. You know, if you say privately to the student, I need to face the class so that I can see everybody, I need you to go to the board and be my secretary because you have nice, neat handwriting. Now notice you would say that privately to the student. So the kid has no chance to fail because you're going to tell him every step to write on the board. So if you're doing math, you're going to say, write 3, 4, 34. And you're going to tell them every step of the way so they can't mess up. This makes them look good in front of the class without anybody knowing what you're doing, but they're getting that PR. Just simply passing out papers, sharpening pencils. I have teachers who acted like they didn't know how to turn on something. You know, like they acted like they had trouble finding something on the computer and got that kid to come up in front of the whole class and find it for you. Oh, you're so, come here, you're good at this. Can you find that for me while I, you know, and so the kid looks good. It's okay if we act like we don't know how to do something, to get a kid to do something, to look good in front of everybody. Call on them for a class reward. And this is just a for fun. Positive Climate says every once in a while just give away a prize for no reason. So you just say, boys and girls, we have all been working so hard today. I would like to give you 5 answers to the homework tonight, or 5 minutes to sit and talk to your friends. I'm going to let somebody decide which one of those 2 prizes. And you act like it's random, but you look around the room and the kids that you call on are the kids with low self-esteem. Well, that kid just won a prize, basically, for the whole class. So it makes that kid look good in front of the whole class. So that's another thing that we can do. Now, before we go on to proficiency, I want you to talk to your neighbors. What are some other things that you know you can do in the classroom to help kids look good in front of their peers? And then we're going to share the best ideas. So talk to your neighbors for just a second. Sorry. Trying to eavesdrop. Don't put it in your mouth. Oh, you did? Oh, sorry.
No. It is. You heard me mention the 50th conference? Well, it used to stand for Illinois Teachers Training. And now we always have some sort of training. So I think 3, 4 years ago, we had wooden.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Dowel rods and stars.
You had money. I don't have money.
Well, you know, from the grant.
Yeah.
But we put stickers on each side. So on one side, the sticker said, TMPR, teach, model, prompt, reinforce. And then what are the others? Prevention was on the other side. So I said, that's the magic wand. One side said prevention, the other said teach, model, prompt, reinforce. Oh, we wish we had some left. We did one.
That'd be cool. I changed it to tip behavior in your favor, teach, imprint by modeling, practice, and praise. Tip. Imprint by modeling.
Okay, so that's
Same thing, but
and then
imprint. I did practice instead of prompt, which is the same.
okay, and if it's
Praise.
praise, okay, similar.
TIPP. All right, who's got a good idea to share? You guys, you're rushing me with all these hands up in the air. Who's got a good idea to share? Thank you.
I'll have kids deliver papers to another teacher.
Excellent. Yeah. So, and that kind of goes along with philanthropy as well, being helpful to you to deliver those papers to another teacher for you. Very cool. Okay, and they look good. Plus, they get out of class and get proprioceptive input, side-to-side movement in their tushy, which is good. Any other ideas? You're among friends. Share.
Just any of the classroom chores, the line leader, ticket taker, erasing the board, kids like to get up and just do something.
Yeah, and they look cool because they got to do it. Very cool.
I have kids count the PBIS class dollars that we have, so we have 3 classrooms at our site, so we have a site goal. And I say, oh, we have 400, can you go count so-and-sos and go count so-and-sos and let me know how many we have together, and then how many do we need to get to our goal kind of thing.
Very cool. I'll repeat that in case you couldn't hear in the back. She has kids count the PBIS bucks or dollars or whatever I forgot what you said they were called. Dollars, PBIS dollars. And so not only are they doing something for the class, they're reporting something very positive, which that makes those words come out of their mouth, and they look good in front of the class by reporting that. So very cool.
Down the same lines as PBIS, we do like a class, we have our classroom anthropause, and sometimes and we do it as a group, but if you give it to that one student, they get to cross it off on our big, our countdown, and then they get to go and tell everybody else, hey, we got a classroom anthropause. So even though
Awesome.
it's a group earned thing, but they still get to be the one that crossed off and let everybody else know. We were really good at the assembly, so we got it.
So it's a group contingency, but kind of an individual payoff for that individual to be the one that get to carry the group contingency panther paw.
I have actually a personal experience. My son has ADHD, and every morning they would send him to go play dodgeball with the older kids, and for his motor breaks for the morning.
Oh,
he
cool.
got to pick a friend in the class to come with him every morning to go play dodgeball, which turned into a wonderful thing for him because the kids all wanted to be his friend. And
Yeah.
his social interactions with his peers improved dramatically because they all wanted to be that kid.
That is awesome. Please go back and tell that teacher that was awesome. I'm sure you already did, but let me just repeat. It's your son has ADHD and he gets a motor break and he gets sent to go play with the older kids, but he gets to pick one friend to go with him from the class to go have his motor break. And what it did was it made him look good to all the kids in the class because everybody wanted to be his friend because they got to go do that, but then it also built the relationships that we're hoping that the kids will build on their own. And we're so busy sometimes during the day that kids don't have time to build those relationships. So it was a great way of building that into the day, making him look good and taking care of his ADHD motor break. So excellent, awesome.
I do a lot of one-on-one because I'm an itinerant, and I find that if you actually have them look back and say, together say, you really have improved in reading. Do you remember just have them evaluate themselves.
Yeah.
99% of the kids, they really have improved, and make them take ownership.
Yeah.
Do you remember when?
I used to have my kids keep graph paper in the front of their notebook and graph their grades every day, just color it in, on the little bitty graph paper. And the only reason I did that was because they could see their grades right there, plus then nobody said, I didn't know I was making a C, or I didn't know I was making a B, or whatever. Plus, they can see their progress right there in whatever color they chose to color in their graph with. So very cool to have that one-on-one conversation with kids and brag about how far they've come. Very cool.
I'm right here as well, and my student is with kind of a mild to moderate mental impairment. And he wrote a story for young authors, and the class voted on whose story was going to win for their class. And his story won. And then then he got to take his story to the kindergarten and read it for them.
Awesome. So he wrote a story for young authors, and the class voted on who won, and he got to take it down to kindergarten and read it, which makes him look good.
That reminded me, we go on the Walk of Pride at our school, so when kids have a good accomplishment, we put this little crown on them. I teach elementary, so they put on this little crown.
Yeah, that wouldn't work at secondary, just so you know.
We also walk to the other classrooms. We have 3 deaf and hard of hearing classrooms at our site, so we walk to the other classroom and the kid reads the story that they could read, or shows their math work or whatever it was.
Awesome. So the Walk of Pride, and you have a special crown.
Yeah.
Very cool. No, I mean, that definitely is something that works for elementary, but not recommended for secondary. It would be the crawl.
I'm a ninth grade teacher, and I have a high school kid. And we do something similar to the dodgeball, where I work at an alternative school too, and a lot of times the kids in the alternative school would give my students a hard time for leaving with me when they had to stay in the class.
Yeah.
So one of the rewards that my students work for is that they get to play a game, or kind of have like a game day, and then when they do that, they get to choose students to come with them. And it has to be students from their class that have had decent behavior. So they work for that, plus it becomes more of a positive by taking them out.
Yeah, so it makes them look, oh, this is kind of a cool thing to get to go. Yeah.
They get to choose their friends.
So same kind of thing, but at the high school level, where they get to pull kids out to come play a game day that they've earned. So, and then because the other kids in the alternative school make fun of them for leaving because they had to stay in the classroom and do work, and they think your kids are leaving to go play games, but they're not really. I know. All right, any other ideas? See, you guys are awesome. All right, so that's the first P. Now the thing is, you've got to do a concerted effort. You can't just say this, and that's why I have this sheet on page 81 where you write it down, and everybody has a copy of this so that everybody is working on all 4 Ps and putting them in place. The next P is proficiency, making up those skill deficits. And when I say skill deficits, it's not just academic deficits. Sometimes it's social skill deficits that are in place with kids. And some kids are really good at flying under the radar of not letting anyone know that they've got some skill deficits. I think about some of the kids who have gotten in trouble so much that they have been sent out of the room, sent to the principal, sent somewhere. Guess what? They're not learning while they're out of the room, and you accumulate that over time. And you've got a kid who's gotten so far behind that sometimes they can't see light at the end of the tunnel. And I read one of the most wonderful books in the whole wide world called Whatever It Takes by Richard Dufour, D-U-F-O-U-R. He's one of the main authors in the book, Whatever It Takes. And they have got a plan for how to get all these kids caught up. And one of my schools in Oklahoma followed that plan, Weatherford High School in Weatherford, Oklahoma. And it's a school of 400 kids, but it's been done up here in Chicago at Adlai Stevenson. And what Oklahoma did, Adlai Stevenson has 4,000 students in it, because sometimes people say, well, yeah, that'll work for a school that only has 400 kids in it. Well, Adlai Stevenson did it with 4,000 students. What Weatherford did was they totally replanned their day, and they built an extra 30 minutes into the day by getting rid of 1 minute per class changing period. They found that they could shorten the transition time by 1 minute for every period. They got rid of a some kind of team time that they had in the morning. They built an extra 30 minutes into the day. They start a few minutes earlier and stay a few minutes later, and then got the other minutes by getting rid of some things. So they have an extra 30 minutes. Every student who is making an A, a B, or a C, during that second 30 minutes, their first 30 minutes is their lunch. Their second 30 minutes, they have a choice. If you're a senior or a junior, you can leave the school and go over to the elementary school and eat lunch with little kids and read to them or work with them and work one-on-one with them. So that's a win-win. So all the little future teachers of America choose to do that. You also can sign up to be in a fun class. Like the psychology teacher teaches criminal minds, and they watch one of the crime scene videos, and then they dissect the psychological properties of the unsub. There's a gifted science teacher who does science experiments you can eat, and he just wrote a little mini grant to get all the stuff to be able to do science experiments you can eat. Just lots of fun classes that kids can sign up for. They also can sign up to have 30 minutes on the computer in the computer lab, and they've got a person in there monitoring that to make sure they aren't on the improper sites. Because kids know they're working ways around all those little firewalls that we put up. The kids can sign up to just sit and talk to friends if they want, or they can sign up to have homework help or just time to work on their homework someplace. So they've got some quiet areas where you can do that. If the kids are making a D or an F, they get to, and this is a gift, they get to go spend a whole week with the teacher whose class they are failing. So 30 minutes every day, Monday through Friday, and they don't have any trouble with the kids skipping out on that or hiding in the bathroom because they get their grades caught up. The teachers get to work most of the time 2-on-1 with a kid. So their very first year of putting this in place, they had 67 students failing 114 classes. After their first year of implementation, they had 0 students failing 0 classes. Regular ed and special ed, no one was excluded. Every single kid passing every single class. The minute they get behind, it doesn't go for weeks and weeks and weeks. The minute they get behind, it goes into effect the next week that they spend a whole week with the class, whose class. That can be done at the elementary level, it can be done at the middle school level, on that book, whatever it takes. And I tell you what, it's a quick read. I bought it, I read it on a 3-hour plane ride. And if I can read it on a 3-hour plane ride with all the distractions that are on a plane, I promise you it's an easy read. It tells you how to set it up at an elementary school, it tells you how to set it up at a middle school, and how to set it up at a high school. It was one of the most fascinating books I'd ever read, because I thought, if they have done this, why don't we all duplicate this to get all the kids caught up? And one of the things at the elementary level is getting grandparents to come in and be your tutors. And, we've got a wealth of people out there in assisted living that the van would even bring them to your school. And they're sweet, for the most part, they're pleasant. They can sit and work with kids, listen to them read, give them that one-on-one, huggy, lovey stuff that grandmas and grandpas like to do to kids. And a lot of kids are missing that in the first place. So it builds a relationship with the kids, and we can get these kids caught up. So another thing that we can do is pre-teach in the privacy, have them come in 15 minutes early in the morning, pre-teach them one thing that you're going to say first. Let's say you're going to be introducing something new, and when you introduce something new, you're going to have some behavior issues with certain kids who struggle. And let's say today we're going to be teaching how to square numbers. And we know there's going to be a couple kids who are going to, burp the alphabet or something to get everybody off track, whatever kids do. Or the older kids stand up and tell you what you can do, and they do use helping verbs with that. But yeah, you do have to kind of admire the fact that they were able to put a whole sentence together, but those weren't quite the words that you wanted them to put together. But so let's say, as the teacher, my anticipatory set to get the kids hooked on it, I'm going to say, boys and girls, I've got a word riddle for you before we start math today. Does anybody know what Foursquare is besides a game out on the playground? Now, we would have taught to mastery that morning in the privacy of the kid coming in early. When I say Foursquare, you're going to think 4 squared. 4 times 4. And you're going to teach the kid real quick that squaring numbers just means that number times itself. So 4 squared is 4 times 4. And gosh, that's cinchy. What's the answer to that? See there? I knew you knew that. How about 3 times 3? You know the answer to that? That's 3 squared. All right, what would 2 squared be? It takes 15 minutes to do that. So then you go in class and the teacher says, boys and girls, got a word riddle for you before we start math today. Does anybody know what 4 square is besides a game out on the playground? Whose hand's going to shoot up in the air? That kid who was struggling because they know the answer. You don't even have to call on that kid every time. It'd be nice if you did it the first time. But then after that, you don't even have to call on them because what happens in your head if you know the answer to the first thing? You feel like you can do the second thing and the third thing and the fourth thing. So pre-teaching is a good thing to do. Looking at those assessments that I know you guys are good at, typically when I talk to classroom teachers, sometimes they don't think about this, where when you're on the behavior support team, you tend to think more about the assessments and have we missed dyslexia or dysgraphia or something else that might be feeding into this behavior. I always tell people to consider a learning disability because so often it gets missed. And there's a website that you can go to that lets you look up dyslexia.com. If you go to dyslexia.com, there are 37 questions and you answer them. And if you answer yes to 10 or more of those questions about a student, then it would be a good idea to consider testing them for learning disabilities or reading disabilities. It's just something to throw out, just to share with staff. Now the next P is power. Power over your emotions. How many of you have felt like hitting somebody? Be honest. Yeah. Everybody does, but you all have power over your emotions. So I like to share with kids what I do to keep from doing those things. You figured out that you don't slug people, but how many of you are dealing with a kid who's hitting or having aggressive behaviors? Almost, quite a few. The hands are down low, but a lot of you are dealing with kids with aggressive behaviors. It's because they haven't learned how to have power over their emotions. So I like to give kids my real life tip. This is what I really do. And kids think I'm nuts when I tell them this. But this is what I really truly do. I have a bad temper. I have kept it in check since I've had children because I didn't want to pass on that bad temper to my children. And I had to come up with something to stop myself from going off the deep end when somebody made me mad. In my mind, they made me mad. What I finally figured out is that person didn't really make me mad. I chose to let that person make me mad. So I have to cause myself some grief when I choose to let somebody make me mad. And here's how I do it, and I'll just give you an example. This summer, my foot was in a cast, and I spent the whole summer with my foot in a cast, and you can just imagine how fun that is to have your foot in a solid cast all summer long. And I was at the grocery store, and there was a perfect prime parking spot right in the front row, and I did not have a handicap tag, and I was not going to use it even if I had had one. And I saw this prime spot, and I thought, wow, I'm waiting for this. So I wait for the mom who's got a baby and 7 bags of groceries. She puts the 7 bags in. She gets her kid out of the cart. She straps him in the car seat. She